And we're back with Sirish Raghuram, who is the CEO and co-founder of Platform9. Sirish, thank you for coming to the studio.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So one of the things I wanted to mention, I don't know if you know this, your book was in our booth. We have a booth at VMworld this year.
We aren't able to keep the book on the shelf. It's
ran
flying
out.
off the shelves.
We literally ran out.
Yeah.
Yours
Thank you.
Yeah, the first one ran
love
out of.
collaborating with you on that.
Yeah, it was great, and it went first. But a lot of that has to do with.
I want to talk to you about part 2 of that book. I was just talking to the team about that.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah. So I have an
fantastic.
idea.
Would love to have the conversation.
Yeah.
It's been very popular, and one of the things we did notice was after VMware made their Tanzu announcement, more people came by and said, "Hey, about this Kubernetes stuff."
I think we need to rename the conference, right? It needs to be called KubeWorld now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you allowed to call this VMworld anymore?
Oh wait,
that's taken.
That's
taken.
It is.
Is it taken?
It is taken.
It's taken. San Diego. See us at KubeCon if you're not there.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot happening here. So tell us what you're doing at VMworld.
Yeah, I think. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I was an engineer at VMware for 12 years. My co-founders at Platform9 were all engineers at VMware. So I've been coming to VMworld since 2005, I think, when it first started. And Platform9, obviously, I think we started Platform9 to make it easy for companies to run hybrid clouds. And we do that with modern orchestration technologies like Kubernetes and OpenStack. And it runs on-prem, it runs on any environment. I think one of the book is obviously talking about Kubernetes. I think there's been so much noise about Kubernetes. I think it'd be really interesting to talk a little bit about why is there so much noise around Kubernetes at VMworld, right?
Yes.
I think that'd be a really good thing to peel back a little bit and
Absolutely.
talk about that. Is this just hype or is there some substance to it?
I think that it's a little bit of both. I obviously, it's coming up. I think it's more substance than hype, but because VMware's putting their weight behind that, I think you're going to see more substance to it.
I think my perspective is that, I think, having been in the virtualization space for as long as I have, one of the things we've always had as a challenge, I think, for the virtualization community at large is that, look, if you go to every enterprise, ultimately, virtualization is a back office technology, right? I mean, it is running the infrastructure that's powering a lot of these businesses and really large enterprises in the world. But how many developers? Every organization now is a software company,
right?
Now think about the software companies, think about the development teams and the DevOps teams in these enterprises. What do they see of the virtualization layer? And the answer is that the beauty of virtualization and the limitation of virtualization is that they don't see it, right? So all this really powerful innovation that has happened in the virtualization technology has largely been limited to the operators of IT infrastructure. Meanwhile, I think the development community has really wanted more rapid ways to express their applications, bring applications, iterate on applications. And I think the cloud providers enable that with, modern cloud experiences, right? I think Kubernetes and containers are, I think, so exciting because I think it gives us a way, I think, for the virtualization community to close that gap between the operators of IT infrastructure and the developers of modern systems and applications.
One of the things that when we think about Kubernetes and OpenStack, though, that people don't generally have top of mind is super easy to use.
Extremely complex, yeah.
A lot of complexity and pain. And one of the things that Platform9 is trying to do is have this kind of modern infrastructure, a modern development platform without the pain.
It should be super easy, right? I mean, that's basically how Platform9 got started is, this realization that, look, you can go to the public cloud and you can be up and running in 5 minutes, right? But a lot of the world's infrastructure is running on-prem or in hybrid environments, and the moment you get these on-prem environments or hybrid environments and you want to get that cloud experience with technologies like Kubernetes, it is super, super hard. I mean, Kubernetes is just, it's like an iceberg, right? I mean, you get started and it goes deeper and deeper. And Kubernetes is also, I think, one component of cloud-native infrastructure. You need a lot of surrounding services, complementary services to Kubernetes. The likes of Prometheus for monitoring, the likes of Istio to enable service mesh and API proxies, the likes of Jaeger for tracing, the likes of Harbor for container registries, and it goes on, right? And so now, do we expect IT teams, right? I mean, think about the IT team that has so much on its plate. Are they supposed to become like the systems integrators of Kubernetes and the cloud native technology landscape? It should not, right? It's got to be easier than that. And that's the whole idea behind Platform9 is that with just a few clicks, you can sign up to the service and you can deploy Kubernetes on your VMware environment or across your VMware environment and any other KVM or public cloud environment in a really easy manner. And you don't need to worry about understanding how to deploy and script all of these technologies together, how to integrate all of these, and how to ultimately support it in a production context, right? It's all taken care of. We provide an SLA. It's super easy to start, and it just works, right? That's the big idea behind Platform9.
So back to the VMware's focus on containers for a second. Do you think that this is a year where we're going to look back and say this was the year that VMware embraced developers? Or is this going to be, this is the year that they made infrastructure more accessible to make it easier to do development? Do you think that this was a development-centric thing, or is it still an infrastructure-centric thing?
It feels like the conference as a whole and the community as a whole is still very much an infrastructure-centric place. But I think it has probably been in the 14 or 15 VMworlds, I think, that have happened now. It feels like the most pivotal moment in terms of talking about this operator-developer gap and acknowledging that and saying that, look, everybody wants to, I think everybody in infrastructure wants to better enable the development teams in their organization. That's the reality. And I think VMware's made big steps in that space, but I think people are going to need a lot of help with that. It's not, you're never going to be able to run Kubernetes as a little feature in vSphere, right? It's far too complex for that.
So if I'm a CIO out there and just your typical run-of-the-mill organization, when do I know that I have to start thinking about this idea of a cloud-native infrastructure that's built on something like Kubernetes and managed by Platform9 or whoever?
I think that, look, any organization that's really serious about digital transformation and cloud transformation, I think you have to be looking at Kubernetes today. I think you'd be giving up a massive competitive advantage to others in your industry if you don't. Here's a few telltale signs, right? If you are thinking about using the public cloud, and not just in a DR context, but you're actually thinking about consolidating data centers and running some portion of your workloads in the public cloud, then Kubernetes and container technology is going to ensure that you can get more value out of those public cloud assets because those are expensive, and you need to make sure that you're able to get more ROI and density and efficiency out of those assets. You can sweat those assets more. If you have a hybrid environment, then containers inherently, if you desire to be hybrid, then containers inherently are far more portable and far more friendly to hybrid architectures than VMs are, right? So it's the same image that can run on-prem and can run in the public cloud or across the different public cloud environments, right? So if you want to use a public cloud but don't want to be locked into one public cloud provider like an Amazon alone or a Google alone or an Azure alone, and you desire to have some flexibility in terms of how you actually be more multi-cloud as opposed to a public cloud user, the containers, again, Kubernetes and containers give you that insulation in that business. I think these are, and then finally, if you have developers in your organization, even if you're not at all using the cloud, but if you have, I would say, more than 100 software developers in your organization, I bet you may not know this, but they're using containers today. And this is the gap that exists where developers are actually already doing this, probably have been doing this for years now. And I think the CIOs and the IT organizations want to better support them by enabling it as a service.
And they can enable it using the same infrastructure they already have.
You already have. I mean, if you have a VMware environment, you have everything needed to enable a true cloud experience, right? All you need is to layer on a technology like the cloud native stack, including Kubernetes, and you can get running. And if you can't support, you can get started. There's so many ways to get started. It isn't the case that you need to have a bunch of applications running in containers to get started with Kubernetes. There's many application blueprints. Every organization, I think, is interested in using technologies like MySQL, Kafka, Cassandra, Elasticsearch, right? Hadoop, Spark. I mean, there's so many organizations that are using all of these technologies. One of the things people don't realize is that you can, using something like Platform9 or other technologies, you can very easily provision a Kubernetes environment on your existing VMware environment and instantly get access to the Kubernetes catalog of these application templates, including Spark, Hadoop, Cassandra, MySQL, Elasticsearch, and so forth. So even without having any of your own applications be containerized and ready to run in Kubernetes today, you can start using all of these off-the-shelf components and start consuming them, and then start building cloud-native applications and microservices around them.
We got a question from the audience. This is a gentleman named David. He is asking, are there any real healthcare organizations looking at or already using Kubernetes in a significant way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the companies that I know is using Kubernetes in a pretty significant way is a major healthcare company in the Northwest called Providence Healthcare. They used to be a VMware environment. They also were in the public cloud, AWS, and I mean, that's just one. I think there's several others that some of whom I can't name that come to mind. That I think Kubernetes is going to become pretty pervasive. It is going to be across industries. I think all the things that I talked about, right? If you're interested in using public cloud, if you're interested in being multi-cloud, if you want to be hybrid, and if you have development and DevOps teams that you want to enable, or you want to get more value out of the infrastructure assets that you have, both on-prem and the cloud, Kubernetes, I think, is the key technology that's enabling that today.
What does a successful journey look like when, from someone who has nothing like that today to a fully realized vision? What does that journey look like to a CIO, to a typical IT person, and to an organization?
I would say the fastest and easiest way to get started is to use some kind of service for Kubernetes. So you can use something like GKE in the Google Cloud, or EKS, Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service EKS in Amazon Cloud, or you can use something like Platform9 that's available today and runs anywhere, right? It runs on your VMware environment, runs on your KVM environment, runs on the big three clouds, Amazon, Google, and Azure. So that way you don't have to deal with a lot of complexity of learning how to deploy and operate Kubernetes and how to integrate the different components. And the deployment is the easy part. The real hard work is how do you keep it up to date? New security vulnerabilities come out all the time. You have highly available clusters. You need to ensure that you can handle outages and you can bring clusters back to parity and the right level of redundancy. So that level of upkeep you don't have to deal with when you use a service. And then, like I said, you can get started using many of these application templates and blueprints that are already available in vanilla Kubernetes catalogs, like Spark and Hadoop and MySQL and Cassandra and Elasticsearch and so forth. And every organization wants to use these technologies. And then start building new microservices, small applications, web applications around those, and enabling it for consumption to the development teams in the organization. And you'll see, I think what every organization CIO is likely to find, or VMware expert is likely to find, is that there is a lot of interest in containers and maybe already usage of containers on the developer side of the house.
So we have a lot of people in the audience who they know what containers are, they know what they do, but they don't understand the why. I mean, why containers versus just the typical what we've always done?
I think it's a long topic. We can spend a lot of time on it. I would say maybe three. I'd give you three reasons, right? The first is, I think, for a developer, I think a container is a great way to package an application, right? Because if they package it as an application, it's fast, it's lightweight, it's super quick. You don't have to deal with the resource requirements of a virtual machine. And it's much smaller, so you can package modules in a container much more easily. You don't think of packaging one module in one VM, right? It's too expensive to do that and too inconvenient. So it's much faster, lightweight, easier to use for development teams. Secondly, as a developer or an operator, I know that if I get an application module or a service in a container, it runs everywhere, right? I can give it to my co-developers or my operations teams, and I know that it's going to run in VMware, it's going to run on bare metal, it's going to run on KVM, it's going to run on Amazon, it's going to run on any cloud, right? And so that portability is very attractive. And maybe the third reason I'd share is you can just get so much more juice by using containers. One of our customers, they realized at one point that their public cloud utilization rate, so they went and measured the VM utilization rate in Amazon EC2. And they found what I think many organizations find is they found 12%. In other words, the VMs that are running on Amazon Web Services are only being used 12% of the time.
And it's why we went to virtualization in the first place.
It's why we went to virtualization in the first place, right? And virtualizations maybe move that from 5% to 20, 30%, but how do you go from 20, 30% to 70%, right? I think containers, because they're so much more easier to pack and burst across multiple VMs, whether you're trying to do this on-prem and you're trying to get your utilization rate up, or in the public cloud where it's even more expensive and it's even more important to do this, I think containers are a great way for you to get more juice out of the infrastructure that you're paying for and sweat the infrastructure much more.
So how are your customers using Platform 9? What kind of benefits are they seeing from using Platform 9 to help them with their containers journey?
I'd say maybe I'd like to again share maybe a few customer case
How
studies,
about it?
right? So S&P Global, for example, I think is one of our largest customers, very strategic financial services, financial technology company based in the East Coast, global organization. They are a large VMware customer, also a large Amazon Web Services customer. They did not want to replace the virtualization layer. They've been quite happy with VMware virtualization, have had it for a long, long time, have an operations team that's very comfortable running VMware vSphere. But the CIO's vision was to enable a modern development experience, and they wanted that modern development experience that was multi-cloud. Initially with Amazon and VMware, but eventually they want to be able to have optionality in terms of using other cloud providers as well. And so they're using us as a way to provide a single pane of glass consumption experience to their development teams and DevOps teams while being compliant on the operations side with all of the regulations that they need to comply with and integrating with all of these different cloud environments. So that's, I think, one example of a classic, developer enablement value proposition. Cloud, it's a hybrid cloud value proposition.
Okay.
Another customer that I cannot name, but it's a very large networking vendor, and I'm guessing a third or fourth of your audience is using them today. Wanted to actually move away from VMware because of they said, look, we want to use containers, we want to use Kubernetes, and we want to bring in much more agility and velocity in doing so. But we don't want to run Kubernetes on top of VMware and have the whole complexity of two stacks because given what we're trying to do in terms of build velocity and developer enablement, we want to run containers, if it's possible, on bare metal. And if you tell us we cannot run it on bare metal, then we'll run it on VMs. So they actually chose to move away from VMware and actually run containers on bare metal. And that has pros and cons, right? You lose the comfort and the availability capabilities that VMware gives you, but you can actually get more out of the hardware because containers are running natively on bare metal. And you simplify the stack in some ways because you just have one stack to operate. It's the Kubernetes stack. And they're doing that. They also had the developer enablement use case, but they wanted to sweat the hardware a lot more and simplify their tech stack.
So are people looking at containers as there's obviously some development benefits because you get more granular with things like you said. It's too expensive to wrap up a virtual machine and have it be a single function. But I looking partially as a utilization play then as well. I think you alluded to that.
It's two really big, two or three really big drivers, right? One is, I think it's much more developer friendly. VMs, for all the innovation we've done in the virtualization community, people
they're just x86.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And the drawback of it.
It was super easy to move applications to it. It's not super easy to move applications to containers.
In fact, VMware's founder, Diane Green, my CEO when I was at VMware, used to say this about VMware, saying we are the most disruptive, non-disruptive technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
It changed everything,
yeah.
But in some ways it changed nothing.
Right, you just dumped all. It was the very definition of lift and shift.
Exactly, and it worked beautifully, right? And it's gotten us a long way, right? But developers want something that they're trying to do things with Ansible and Chef and Puppet, and those are, I think, fairly challenging technologies. I mean, they have a place, but I think containers are so much more developer friendly, number one. Number two, you can pack so many containers in a virtual machine. So if you're using Amazon EC2 and you're watching that meter tick and you're figuring out how do I get more out of the spend? How do I, spend more effectively? Or whether you're trying to do that on-prem, I think containers are great for being able to do that. And number three is they truly give you they're a hybrid friendly abstraction because they're inherently portable. And VM technology, because of the nature of the technology, a VMware VMDK versus an Amazon AMI versus a Google Cloud image versus a KVM image versus an Azure image, they're all very different things. And converting these back and forth across these formats does not work. It's kind of too kludgy.
And containers are the common fabric.
Inherently portable, right? And that's a very powerful thing. So three things: developer friendly, resource efficiency, and inherently multi-cloud friendly, hybrid cloud friendly.
And it's super easy. The barrier to entry is super low if you really just want to start playing with them.
I mean, just for example, Platform9, I mean, if you have any server infrastructure, if you just have x86 servers or you have public cloud environments or you have VMware, you can literally go to platform9.com, with a few clicks, get your service up and running. And and be up and running with containers and start using the catalog and start, playing with it. Everybody starts, that's how we got started with virtualization all those years ago, is
Playing with it.
VMware Workstation. It was actually VMware Workstation.
It was,
right?
It was, you're right.
And playing with it. And my first experience with virtualization was the killer app for me was being able to play Warcraft on my Linux machine. And that's how you start, and then you find and you learn the technology and you understand it and you can get so much more out of it.
I liked Warcraft. I wish it was not.
We should talk.
We should. So Platform9, when I go to platform9.com and I sign up and I start playing with it, what are you actually deploying into my environment? Is it an agent, is it a VM? What's actually happening to bring Platform9 goodness to my environment?
So the way Platform9 works is we have a cloud control plane. That control plane is what allows us to make this easy, right? Because it's deployed from the cloud, it's monitored from the cloud, new updates come out from the cloud, right? In many ways, what VMware announced with Tanzu in preview, we've already had and have been in production for a long time. And then you plug in your infrastructure. So let's imagine that you're using your VMware environment. You can point it at your vSphere clusters, and it discovers it seamlessly integrates with vSphere. It works with the vSphere API, discovers the servers and physical capacity that you have, the virtual capacity that you have, the networks and storage. And all of those environments now become available for you to very easily provision Kubernetes clusters onto. And once you have a Kubernetes cluster, now the Kubernetes API is your playground, and the Kubernetes catalog of applications with Helm and operators is your playground. And we have additional services like Prometheus for monitoring, Istio for service mesh, and others that we're investing in to make it easy to be able to go beyond, I think, building basic applications to building modern, powerful microservices applications.
We have another question from the audience. I'm not sure how to answer this one. What are the options to run Windows containers on VMware?
So, trick question.
Yeah.
I think I would say the answer in two ways. A lot of companies ask for Windows support because they have a .NET application or they have .NET applications. And I would say that if your applications are written to .NET Core, we've actually seen a lot of companies use .NET Core with Microsoft now embracing Linux and supporting .NET Core on Linux. Your .NET Core applications can actually run really well on Linux virtual machines. So that might be something that you can consider. But if, let's say, you have an application set that doesn't just depend on .NET Core, you want to run things like SQL Server and others, then you're going to have to run Windows virtual machines. And it works exactly the same way. You need to use Windows virtual machines and create clusters out of that. Kubernetes support for Windows is more recent than support for Linux, but it is there. And since 1.13, I think, support for Windows has been generally available in the Kubernetes community.
Very good. Thank you so much for dropping by. Great. Congratulations on the success of Platform9.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.